On the 50th anniversary of the 1971 War of Bangladesh Independence, the Living History Project is pleased to present our second episode. First, we provide some background on the 1971 war. In 1947, the Indian subcontinent was divided into India and Pakistan on the basis of religion, Muslim Pakistan and a secular India. Pakistan consisted of East and West Pakistan, separated by 1,000 miles and different language, ethnicity, and culture. That inevitably led to issues of inequity and alienation on part of Bengali Muslims of East Pakistan. The tensions came to a head when, in the general elections in 1970, the Awami League in East Pakistan, led by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, won an absolute majority and the right to form central government. This result was not acceptable to the Pakistani army led by General Yahya Khan, which then ruled Pakistan. Sheikh Mujib was arrested and Pakistani army launched Operation Searchlight in East Pakistan. The goal of the operation was to terrorize and cower the population into submission. The resulting killing has been officially termed a genocide. This resulted in a call for independence, civil war, and massive flood of refugees from East Pakistan, estimated to be over 5 million that came into India. The civil war intensified with the freedom fighters in East Pakistan called Mukti Bahini fighting Pakistani army with logistic support from India. Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi went on a diplomatic mission to the United States and the Soviet Union to explain India's predicament and get support. However, UK, US, and China were sympathetic to Pakistan, while the Soviet Union provided diplomatic and military support to neutralize US-China pressure. Pakistan made a strategic decision to launch a preemptive strike on India's western border. The goal was to grab enough territory on the western front and then bring UN Security Council to bring pressure for a ceasefire, then negotiate with India from a position of strength. Pakistan's gambit failed as Indian armed forces achieved an upper hand on the western front, while the Soviet Union used its veto to keep the UN Security Council at bay. The war was over in 14 days when Pakistani army chief in East Pakistan, General Niazi, unconditionally surrendered to General Arora of the Indian Army. India declared unilateral ceasefire, ending the war. Our guest for the second episode of the Living History Project dealing with the 1971 War of Bangladesh Independence is retired Colonel Anil Atle. Colonel Atle has a unique personal perspective on this historic event, and in keeping with the spirit of the Living History Project, that's what he will bring. Colonel Atle joined the National Defense Academy in 1964 after finishing his high school from Vidyapit High School in Kolhapur. He received his commission in the 1st Battalion of the 9th Regiment of Gurkha Rifles in the Indian Army in 1968. As a captain, he was captured on the Western Front at the very beginning of the 1971 war on 4th of December. In an interview recorded in 2005, he recounts in detail events leading to his capture, his experiences during 1 year of captivity, his interactions with his Pakistani captors, and other observations. It should be noted that this is his personal perspective and his memory of events that happened over 34 years ago. Colonel Atlay's additional operational experience includes counter-insurgency operations in Punjab, Operation Blue Star. On the academic side, he attended Army Staff College in Wellington and received a PhD in strategic studies from Savitribai Phule University in Pune, India in 1988, with a thesis dealing with the situation in the Middle East. He was deputed to the History Division of Ministry of Defense in 1986, where he co-authored official histories of Indochina War of 1962 and counterinsurgency operations in the Northeast. He took an early retirement in 1991 to focus on research. He was the recipient of fellowships from General Palit Military History Foundation to study Maratha history, the Kennedy Center at Harvard University, Indian Philosophical Society, Fulbright Fellowship, and Chhatrapati Shivaji Fellowship from the United Services Institute. He has studied conflict and reconciliation in various parts of the world, specifically Kashmir, Sri Lanka, Mizoram, Northern Ireland, and South Africa. He has lectured on this topic at many institutions in India and overseas, including Georgetown University, University of Illinois, and Brookings Institute in the United States and University of Heidelberg, Germany. He has also written several books on warfare: Nuclear Menace, The Satyagraha Approach, Let Jhelum Smile Again, Maratha Struggle for Empire, Quest for Peace, and Studies in Counterinsurgencies. Colonel Atlay has also participated in some international events dealing with the issues of human rights and democracy. His interview is divided in two parts. First part deals with the details of his capture and early parts of his captivity. The second part discusses his experiences and impressions between the time he was transferred to Pakistani Army General Headquarters in Rawalpindi and its subsequent repatriation to India 1 year later. On a personal note, Colonel Anil Atlay is my older brother, and I'm proud to call him Anil Dada all my life. Now we present Colonel Anil Atlay.
I'll ask you some sort of basic questions. तर आता 71 वॉरच्या इथे you started telling me a little bit की when you were at Mahu attending the
weapons course.
The weapons course. Yeah. So when did you?
It was in August 71 when we were doing this course. So the course was curtailed and we were told to quickly before December. That's the time when I came to Bombay and we met and we had the choice of seeing two movies.
Mm-hmm.
So I said we'll prefer to see Patton. Patton and दूसरा काय choice होता?
I don't remember
Some other
that.
movie. Yeah.
Graduate वगैरह ऐसा काही असतं?
Not Graduate. And we saw Patton in Strand and I remember. I told you this in August or July or something that by December, as we say, balloon is going to go up, but keep it to yourself. And I also remember कि मैं तुला toilet मध्ये I told you in the toilet and that was it. So course was done quickly and by I think it was last week of November, actually 23rd, 24th of November that finally the course was shut down, the establishment was shut down, everybody was sent to their units because all training establishments were shut down. And that is the time I landed in Ambala. This was just about a week, 10 days before the war.
Yeah. Now you were still joining 19.
Yes, I was part of 19, and interestingly, I had trained the commando platoon of the battalion. But since I went for this course, and whether I would be there or not, so somebody else was given the charge of the commando platoon. I wouldn't say anything else. He was an ass. He had not even done the commando course. I am a commando instructor with him. And I had taken real great pains to train the commando platoon. So I was deprived of that, and quite rightly, because operational plans were told to him and he had rehearsed with them and all that. Instead, my course that I had done on machine guns and anti-tank guns, so I was made in charge of both these weapon systems, and which is more or less a support system, not actually in the assault. Commandos would have gone, commandos did go in the first phase of assault, silent attack. So that was the thing. And interestingly, how things function, not just in India, I think everywhere. There I found basic critical spare parts like firing pin, without which a gun can't work,
Yes.
not available. So I used my initiative. I went to the local Sardarji foundries in Batala, took a sample with me. I said, इसको duplicate करके दे दो Sardarji. And I tell you, they didn't even ask me for money, but I said, look, here is the money. We need it. Then the guns were not aligned with the spotter rifle, without which they're useless. Anti-tank gun has to be very accurate.
Yes.
Now there's no time to go to firing area where you can do all this. So I told my CO, I said, you forget where I'm going. I went to a canal side. We literally dug a ditch to put the gun below. And on a normal canal bank, we did the firing. And a lot of risk naturally. Some bullet or something,
Yeah.
somebody died.
Yeah.
But that is war. So you have to do these things. And so I aligned all my guns and all that, and was feeling happy about the whole thing. This was around the last week of November, and 1st of December, 2nd of December. And patrolling activity had started. We were all waiting. Every day there used to be a message, oh, war imminent, war imminent. Then they'll say, no, no, stand down, that kind of a thing. That is how it was going on.
Hurry up and wait.
But then, on the 3rd of December particularly, I recall, this was month of December, so it gets very dark very early. And since it was closer to the 1st, salary had to be distributed. And since I was in the headquarters, so I was told go and dish out salary and all that. But on 3rd December in particular, for no rhyme or reason, I was very, not depressed, but there was no particular earthly reason. I suppose premonition or whatever you may call it. I was depressed. I did all that salary distribution and all that, and came back to the battalion headquarters. By then it was already 6:30 or something in the evening, dark, pitch dark. 6:30 December, pitch dark. So the adjutant suddenly sprung a surprise on me.
This 3rd of December.
3rd of December. CB Thapa, late. You remember it, Michael?
Yes.
Chitrabhasu Thapa, tall fellow. He died in an accident later. So he said, Anil, you have to go on a patrol. So I said, ठीक है, but normally you get a little time to plan and this and that. No, this was then 2nd of December. Yeah, I think it was 2nd of December. Yeah, that he told me I have to go for a patrol and all that. Next day, 3rd. But the patrol is to be from the forward locality. The area where we were, at a place called Dheraba Banana,
Yes.
there the Ravi river meanders like that, and the border cuts through that. So there are small enclaves across the river, which are Indian, and Pakistani enclaves across this side, the river. River Ravi in those areas looks deceptively shallow, and in being dead of winter, less water. But this was told subsequently that there are places where it's very deep. Anyway, it's a major river. So I was told to go to the forward company, and I said, for patrol you need men. It was a reconnaissance patrol kind of a thing, and laying an ambush on the border across the river to catch people who were infiltrating and this and that. So the men unfortunately were two people picked from here, two from there, kind of a, I didn't even see their faces. They reported to me in the evening of 3rd, and I left on patrol. I was given not even given a radio set. I was told I'll pick up a radio set on a forward post. Where I must have reached around 7:38. All that time no communication. Cross the river on the boat bridge, Ravi River. And there I asked these people, I want a radio set. They said, we have no radio set. So now I got back to the battalion. I said, look, I don't have a radio set, no communication. So around that time, the news had come in that war has started. Now, interestingly, the task I was given was a purely peacetime task. Patrolling our side of the border, not going across. But once a war starts,
That's okay.
the border is just a line on map.
Yes.
I mean, there is nothing like a border. So I asked the adjutant, Sri Thappa, I said, look, I can see that the task is a peacetime task. My real task was manning those guns and operational plans for attack, which we had a plan for attack on 6th of December. So I said, do I still continue with the patrol? He also saw my point, saying that this was a useless task. So he got back to the brigade headquarters. I was the brigade major, saying, should we continue with this patrol? There was another of those bullshitter character there, brigade major. He said, oh, just because the war has started, 19GR doesn't want to do patrolling. So my adjutant said, well with you. So he told me that. I said, fine, I'll go for my task. So I landed there at the forward post. By then, there was no doubt in anybody's mind that the fighting had begun. Not in our sector. It was quiet. But I met a very old, wise BSF officer, senior to me, major's rank. I was a captain. He said, Atle, don't go for this patrolling. Stay in the post, give a report, you have done the patrolling, and go back. This is stupid. Task to walk along the border. The border means nothing after war. I remember, I think that I told him, I said, look, if this would have been a normal time and war wouldn't have started, I would have probably taken your advice because it was a stupid task. But now that the war has started, I don't want to not do a job or a task just because it is stupid. The war is stupid anyway. So I said, no, sorry, I'll go for my job. He said, best of luck. So that's how the whole thing started. So I went further to a post which was very close to the Pakistani city of Narowal. and I was to begin the patrolling from there and come back along the border and back to the forward defences, because forward defences were a little behind
Setback.
the setback from the border. These were border posts or the border security force. Just as I was, I was supposed to get BSF guides, because this is night and this is a riverine terrain with that thick sarganda grass, where in daytime you can't see a thing. There are no tracks, no nothing. So you need guides for taking you on the paths, and the BSF people are supposed to do that. So they were there. As I was briefing my patrol, the first shells I heard going over the head, zoom, 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 and dome, dome, dome on the other side. And so fighting began in our sector also. And people have different reactions to the first
Yes.
shelling.
Yes.
I had sufficient training to know that if you hear the sound, that means it is going ahead of you. So you're okay.
Yeah.
And especially we were in a kind of a embankment. So now if you are on the other side of the embankment, either the shell, because the shells are flat, most of the modern guns fire reasonably flat, unless they are mortars which come vertically. So you're reasonably safe if you are close to the embankment on the other side of the gun. But lo presto and behold, before I could even look around me, the first shells came. All the fellows with whom I was briefing vanished. I found myself alone in the bunker. I said, "Kahan gaye sab kuch?" They all ran into trenches. I also came out, I didn't even know where the trenches were. So I sat outside only. But I used my knowledge, and then I had to think, what do I do now? So it was very clear that in case of war, these enclaves will be just taken over by the enemy. So
And nobody was going to defend it on the
there
other
was no
side.
defenses.
Yeah.
So these border OP posts are withdrawn. Now, I had other tasks to do. I was stuck there in the forward post. So I said, time is to go back. But even to go back, I must first gather my men. So just generally giving a thought as to what do I do now next. So after the first shell continued, I sat down there against all teaching. I took out a cigarette. I used to smoke cigarettes first. Smoked a cigarette. Around. Calmed myself, and then I said, staying here is stupid. I must get my patrol together, follow the route, and go back to the forward locality. That patrolling task was redundant once the war has started. Reconnaissance you don't do during attack.
No.
So I blew my whistle, I had a whistle, and I gathered out of 7 men detailed with me, 6 of them I gathered together, and we started on our patrol. Difficult walking. This must be around 8:39, 9:30. We must have walked up to about 2:33 in the morning. Because by then it was Diwali night or 4th of July as they call it. Because the Pakistanis launched an attack on that. You could hear tanks, you could hear artillery. And the funny part was, once that information reached our side shelling also started. So we got it from both sides. And my only wish at that time was that if I have to die, I should die of a Pakistani shell, not Indian shell, getting caught on the wrong side. Anyway, I think by the time it was 2:53, the Pakistani troops had already reached the river line. And we found ourselves behind the enemy lines, so to say. That is how it was. And now how to reach back was the job, which continued. I found even good soldiers, many of them were veterans who had seen war in 65. But many of them were youngsters, they were scared. But nobody would be prepared to lead. So I said, to hell with you, I'll lead the damn patrol. So I was literally the number one man walking. And my men, that's one thing about Gurkha, they'll always follow you. I'll never desert you. That is absolutely. So as we were going, we heard a lot of noise. And so the man behind me said that there's somebody here. So we halted. And as I described you the terrain, even in daytime you can't see anything. At night, it's madness. So, as is the teaching, I told my patrol to take position. 6 of them, generally lying down position, with weapons ready and all that. And 2 of us, me and my patrol lead, Naik, NCO, non-com. I said, let us go and investigate where the hell they are so that we skirt them or whatever it is. We found ourselves in the midst of a Pakistani battalion. They didn't know how we had come there. We didn't know how we had landed there. And literally, before we could say Jack Robbins, in fact, my non-com almost stepped on a Pakistani soldier who was taking position there. And then we could see a silhouette of a tank, this, that, etc., etc.
Not a very comforting sight.
Not a comforting sight. So before one could say anything literally, both he and me were physically grabbed by Pakistani soldiers. My regret was I could not even give any orders to my men to open fire or something. Because that situation was such, confusing situation, that if my men would have opened fire, we had a machine gun. Those Pakistanis would have run away. Because suddenly, imagine you find
from behind you.
From behind you inside a battalion if there is firing going on by somebody. Small arms firing, not artillery. But anyway, that was not to be. And that is how I got caught. I mean, literally, whenever anybody has asked me, how did you get into it, I said, look, in fact, one of the Pakistani Jawans, how he detected our patrol was he came there to pee. And when I realized that these were Pakistani soldiers, I tried to bluff my way through also. And in that kind of a situation, there is no question of following procedures and all that. So one of the Pakistani soldiers asked the standard question, "Kaun hai? Who is it? Who goes there?" kind of a thing. So I spontaneously replied also, "Apne hi hai." Our people only. That triggered a response for him to catch me, because much later I was told that the correct response to "Kaun hai" in Pakistan and Punjabi language is not "apne hi hai," "appu hi hai." अपने ही है, ये कोई अपना नहीं है. So that is that anyway.
But what about the soldiers, your rest of the people behind? They were also caught immediately.
We were in the midst of a company forming a place, as they call it, which is ready to go into an assault. So they were all well caught. They couldn't even open fire. And in any case, I mean, imagine the Sarkanda grass in which you are barely able to see your next door neighbor in daytime. At night time, war is always confusing. That's how it happened.
So this was at about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning?
Closer to 4, I think. One could start seeing the morning light. We must have been walking for at least 3 to 4 hours. My guess is where we were caught, in order to avoid the obvious routes from which we had come, the jeep tracks and all that, I think we had gone inside the Pakistani territory also, even peacetime Pakistan. That's it about the.
So let me just add a little bit of my recollection. तू म्हणालास तसं 3rd of December. I think it must have been around 6 o'clock. That मी कॉलेजमधनं घरी गेलो होतो. Actually, I was there. And all of a sudden, a news flash came that Pakistani planes have bombed our airfields. And that was it. And it basically said, please hold on for an important address by the Prime Minister to the nation. And it kept going on like that, practically till 10:30 or 11 o'clock. It was just literally, and then all these instructions came, blackout, so all the lights were out, and we were just basically huddling by the transistor.
You were at Kanpur at that time?
No, I was in Mumbai.
Mumbai.
Ajali. And then I think finally at 10 o'clock or something thereabouts, Mrs. Gandhi came and she said, we have been attacked in a cowardly fashion, blah, 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 blah. And so we have no other recourse but to strike back. And of course, all of us, and particularly I knew that you were going to be somewhere there. And that was just on everybody's mind. And we went to bed but not asleep. And at midnight, the air raid siren went off. I don't think I have ever come that close to peeing in my pants as that whole build-up of everything.
Yeah.
And then air raid siren with that horrible noise. Next day, I don't know when we got the news. I don't think we got the news immediately. Must have been 2-3 days or so.
2-3 days.
Yeah. So I had gone to college, and college, everything, the atmosphere was just totally charged, very different. And at that time, they had started some air raid patrols classes or something like that. And I think it was 5th or something thereabouts that they had an air raid patrol class in Ruia College, Gymkhana. I was attending there, and halfway through that, one boy came running and he said, "Hey, actually, there is a phone call in the office and you are asked to go to your Maushi's place immediately." So of course, that's...
You could imagine.
That just...
Yeah.
So I started.
Yeah.
And Sudhir Pandit, whose brother was in the Air Force. I mean, rest of the people, they were not as cued to these things as he was. So the moment he saw, he just told Avya that don't let him go by himself, go with him. And so we went, both of us went, my Moshi Chakre. We went up and I was sitting there. And Tarali, that's the classic. Tarali. And what did the telegram say? And this is one of the weirdest things. I remember my feeling and my reaction so well that they said that he's missing in action. That was the first telegram, missing in action. My immediate reaction was, boy, how I was going to give you a hard time when you come back. That right on the first day, you did something stupid or something like that. Somehow, that instant, that thought that something bad could have happened to you did not enter my mind at all. Afterwards, many times, you imagine all these things, especially till the next telegram came saying that you are confirmed to be a POW. In that, missing could mean anything. Could mean literally missing or could mean dead.
No, it's generally missing, believed, killed.
Yes, that's right.
It's called missing,
that time, but that time we didn't know all these protocols. I mean,
MIK.
Yes, now I understand that. Had there been something like that, that missing, presumed dead.
Believed, killed.
Believed
That
killed
is
or
the
something.
standard phrase.
So I think, and it was probably a couple of weeks before we got the second telegram. that the Red Cross has confirmed that your son is held POW. So that was my side of the
Yeah,
story
the side.
up to that point.
Yeah.
Now I will. Yeah.
Okay, otherwise,
Yeah. Okay. So now I think we should probably talk about the early phase of your captivity.
yeah. See, very interesting. I don't want to forget those events. When I was caught, luckily for me, the war had not started full blast in that sector. So there was no earthly reason for people who caught me to be revengeful, bloodthirsty, etc. That is the first factor which saved my life.
Yes.
Had the same capture taken place, say after 5-6 days, when our attack on their enclave was successful, we killed about 130 odd Pakistani soldiers, and some of them brutally with kukris by Gurkhas. Had I been caught after that, I would have been killed on the spot. Because the most dangerous and the most vulnerable stage of capture, I had done this course, escape and evasion, etc. etc. So there we were told very clearly that the most dangerous phase is when you are in the battlefield and yet not sort of removed from the battlefield. In the battlefield anything can happen, and strictly to call it a human rights violation is nonsense.
No.
When do you say the battle has ended and captivity has started? Anyway, but that wasn't the case, so I was taken back to Narowal. In between, an interesting incident happened that suddenly there was some shells fell in the general vicinity. They were quite far away. So all my men and I myself, we were of course tied with ropes and all that in a line. We continued to be standing, but our Pakistani escorts, they were so scared they immediately went to ground. So we all looked at them, kya ho gaya? That kind of a thing. Then the officer who was escorting us looked at them with disdain and saying, these fellows are displaying cowardice where these guys are not bothered. And it has a repercussion later on. The men did not even know how to put the rifle to safe and this and that. The officer took every Jawan's rifle and put it on safe and gave it to them. Anyway, taken back to Narowal, where the brigadier, tall fellow, almost 6 feet 2 inches tall, Pathan, he saw me up and down. Didn't speak anything. I didn't speak anything either. From there we put in a jeep around close to 3:34 or something, and we were being driven to Sialkot, I presume. I came to know it was later on Sialkot. Gujranwala, sorry. Gujranwala. Funnily, the officer, Pakistani army officer, caught me, who was escorting me. He made the Jawan sit in the rear and offered me the front seat along with him. Sharing a seat. And straight hand back, but sharing a seat. The second question he asked me is, are you a regular officer or short service officer? I said, I'm a regular officer from National Defence Academy, India. He said, thank God, these short service officers. I mean, you can't imagine. He was a regular. For him, a regular officer from Indian Army was closer than a short service commissioned officer of Pakistani Army.
Yeah.
He said, those guys don't know anything. Then he said, oh boy, now, before he handed me over to the divisional headquarters, which was at Gujranwala, he said, oh boy, it is going to be as bad as your first term. So I told him, I said, I hope it is not as bad. And mind you, it is retrospect, and I've been saying it again and again. captivity and everything I went through was much less than what I had gone through in first term in India. It had prepared me for every stupid thing. And once one went through that other one felt okay. I mean, this is much less than the first term in India.
So the Pakistani officer said that I hope it is less than your first term.
No, he just said that, so you're back to first term kind of a thing.
Achha. So he knew about the first term and the ragging and everything.
There, I don't think it's very different anyway.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So,
It's sort of the international brotherhood of soldiers.
yeah, it is there. In the sense, unwritten, written code, this, that, especially between the Indian and Pakistani armies. Ethos are the same, blood is the same. Whatever they today Muslim, it doesn't matter. But so there is that you can say not camaraderie or something, but understanding.
It's different, let me put it this way, it's different than a white American being captured by a North Vietnamese.
Yeah. I suppose language also makes a difference.
Exactly.
And the first thing straight away, they call it Urdu, we call it Hindi.
Yeah.
The language is actually Hindustani. It's neither Urdu nor Hindi. So, anyway, now at the first stage at Gujranwala, standard tactical questions and all that. Where is this? Where is that? It, as I mentioned to you earlier, I was lucky because in my shirt pocket they found firing pins of the guns. So, what are you doing with that? I said, look, I am basically anti-tank gun commander. I was just sent on this patrol. And I think the first night itself, I generally formulated my own strategy, which was based on truth. Was that, look, I was doing a course in Mao till last week. As to where is battalion, division, brigade, I hardly know, and genuinely I did not know. As to the plans at a captain level, who the hell knows? Infantryman's vision is very limited.
Yeah.
So then I also came to a conclusion and a premise that telling them about machine gun or that anti-tank gun US manufacture, 106 recoilless rifle, machine gun, the course on which I did, Mag 58 NATO standard equipment. I said, is there anything that they don't have? Is there anything that I tell them about these two weapons is in any way security or something? He said, nothing. So I said, as far as I am concerned, I'll tell you tactically these two weapon systems. Other than that, this is my task and I have just come. I was lucky in a certain sense. One of the Jawans who was captured with me in this thing refused to even recognize me. In the sense, he had never seen me in the battalion. He had joined when I had gone on the course and he was just put in that patrol. So when they asked, आपके साहब का नाम क्या है or something like that, मुझे नहीं पता, ये पता नहीं हमारे साहब है. So it corroborated my story, which was a true story. This is what I think is the reason and rationale for my survival and not having too much trouble in Pakistan, because they soon realized that this guy genuinely does not know.
It's clueless. Yeah.
More than clueless, he just comes from home. Took a train, was zeroing his machine guns, this, that, etc., etc. Knows about the machine guns and rifles. But beyond that, I did not genuinely know where the divisional headquarters was. So, to tell them anything, I said, look, you expect me, who had just come from home, to tell you where it's. You ask the questions and you want information, you will know information because I don't have none. So it's, of course, this was this is the later stage. But the first stage, I must. I checked into Sialkot and from Gujranwala. By the time we reached Sialkot, we were handed over to CMP, Corps of Military Police character. He put us in an open truck and drove us through Punjab with the frenzy you can imagine. In daytime, there were crowds wanting to pelt stone. Oh, share, this, that. Maro, Kafiroko, and all that nonsense. I was looking at all that. And I still remember telling this guy, I said, so this officer, generally CMP has the most third-rate officers of the army put into that generally. So I could see he had nothing in him. So he was also captain, I was a captain. So he said, look at the spirit of the Pakistani people. There's no spirit. This is frenzy. Frenzy is not spirit. Anyway, we survived that drive through Sialkot. There was the first interrogation that I faced, where all this, what I mentioned earlier and all that, and to which my answer for all this time is, what the hell, I mean? But I have a recollection, genuine. Then that guy asked me in the interrogator, so would you like to rum, whiskey, beer and all that, because they have been projected that Indian army people drink like fish. We drink, but not like fish. Anyway, so I said, no, I like a cup of coffee or something. Later on I was told that it was basically to induce some drugs. Because I think they were already prepared. And because that day onwards all communication sort of breaking out. And I had to keep a count of the days. I still have this recollection that the day I was at Sialkot and the day I landed in Rawalpindi, GHQ, the main interrogation center of the ISI and whatever, I think I am missing a day or two. This is not in retrospect, but genuinely, I've been a fairly voracious reader, so I had heard of this kind of a thing, and I was looking at this possibility. So I had decided that I will only think of pretty girls and nothing else. So that if they, I think they had put me under some kind of a drug or serum, and they would have only heard of girls and girls. Must have been fed up. Then we landed in Rawalpindi, which is the GHQ.
So,